Ellen DeGeneres isn't who you think she is. When her talk show ended in 2022, the headlines called it a farewell, a celebration. But backstage, it was something else entirely. There were rooms we weren't allowed in, corridors that always stayed cold, and rules, unspoken ones, about when to speak, where to walk, and most of all, never to look directly at her unless you were told to. For nearly 2 decades, she danced on that stage while the rest of us worked under it, faceless, voiceless, and watched, constantly watched. After my final week on the job, I promised myself I'd never talk about what I saw. But silence only protects the monster. And it's time you knew what was really behind that smile. I thought landing a job at the Ellen DeGeneres Show would change my life. I was 34, broke, and barely holding on to the dream of working in entertainment. I'd been a film major once, dropped out, spent years editing wedding videos and freelancing on low-budget sets around LA. This was supposed to be the big break. Instead, it made me feel invisible. My official title was Segment Research Assistant, but what that really meant was the guy who delivered fact sheets to people too famous to look up. My job was to prep Ellen for her guests. Every morning I printed the day's rundown, celebrity talking points, their latest projects, funny anecdotes, and walked it to her dressing room, or sometimes directly to her on set. And every single time, she would hold out her hand without looking at me. No smile, no acknowledgement, not even a nod. Just that cold, blank reach, like she expected the world to move at her convenience. It wasn't just her. Backstage was like a caste system. Segment producers, writers, and audience wranglers all moved in separate circles. You could feel the hierarchy in every hallway. If you were below the line, you didn't exist. Nobody said it out loud, but the rule was clear. Don't speak unless spoken to, and never, ever make things awkward. The senior staff carried tension like armor. You'd hear them yelling into earpieces, threatening interns over missed coffee orders, snapping at makeup artists for taking too long to powder a forehead. But the second Ellen walked by, all smiles, all light. It was strange, the way the air changed when she passed. Like someone had opened a freezer door behind you. It wasn't just nerves, it was physical. There were stories, little ones, whispered over quick lunches. A guy from lighting who was fired for using the wrong hallway. A woman in audience coordination who cried every morning before taping. And always, always, the same advice. Keep your head down. Do your job. Smile when you're asked to. I followed those rules for months, until the night I stayed late. It was a Thursday. Most of the staff had cleared out after wrap, but I was still piecing together last-minute trivia for a surprise segment on Friday. I was the only one left on my floor. At least I thought I was. I printed the revised fact sheet and decided to walk it to Ellen's desk myself. One less thing for the morning rush. The stage was mostly dark, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you instinctively slow down. The doors to the guest green rooms were open, lights off, shadows stretching into the hallway. And that's when I heard it, a voice. Low, calm, unmistakably hers. Ellen. I paused. Her words were too soft to make out, but the cadence was familiar. She was talking to someone. I turned the corner gently, careful not to make noise. The hallway curved slightly, ending near the back of the set storage area. I saw her then, standing with her back to me, angled toward the wall, like she was speaking to someone just out of sight. And then, that someone moved. A shape, tall, unmoving at first. And then, in a single fluid step, it faded backward into the shadows like smoke being pulled into a vent. No sound, no resistance, just gone. I stopped breathing. Ellen turned slowly, as if she'd known I was there the whole time. She smiled. Not her on-camera smile. Something smaller, stiffer. No one. She said softly. Have a nice day. And she walked past me like it never happened. I stood there for a full minute before moving. The hallway still smelled like lavender and sweat. I felt my arms covered in goosebumps. Maybe it was stress, maybe it was a trick of the light. But something about the way that figure moved, it wasn't human. And something about the way Ellen said, "No one." She didn't ask what I'd seen. She told me, as if she knew. I went home that night, thinking about the hallway, replaying it, convincing myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Because after that moment, everything felt wrong. After the hallway incident, I tried to convince myself I was just exhausted. That the figure I saw was a crew member, maybe security, maybe a reflection. But no matter how many excuses I stacked together, something inside me stayed unsettled. Because the truth is, Ellen didn't act surprised when she saw me. She didn't ask what I was doing there or explain away what I'd witnessed. She just smiled, calm, gentle, and told me exactly what to believe. "No one. Have a nice day." The next few days felt wrong. It started with little things. The printer near my desk kept jamming, even though no one else had trouble with it. I kept hearing faint feedback in my earpiece, like someone breathing into a mic that wasn't plugged in. Then there was the temperature. Entire corridors backstage would drop 10 degrees the moment Ellen walked through. I checked. I actually carried a small digital thermometer one day just to be sure. It dropped to 59.3 degrees in hallway C when she passed by. That was the same hallway I'd seen the shadow figure vanish into. Other strange things began happening. The segment sheets I submitted would come back different. Lines I didn't write, notes I didn't add. Once, a prep sheet for a comedian guest came back with a handwritten sentence in the margin. "He thinks they're laughing with him." I never showed it to anyone. Just stared at it for a long time, then shredded the page and rewrote everything from scratch. But the days that were truly the worst were the days Diddy came to set. You could feel it before he arrived. The staff got quiet. The studio felt like it had no air. It was like two frequencies started overlapping, the regular world and whatever world Ellen and Diddy shared. They never spoke to the crew, never broke character. They just walked through the sound stage like they were watching a rehearsal for something we couldn't see. Ellen wouldn't even smile on those days. She didn't have to. One taping, I passed by them both as they stood silently outside the green room. Neither of them moved. They just stared, not at me, but through me. It felt like I had wandered into a place I was never supposed to be, and they knew it. I tried asking harmless questions. Once I said, "Hey, do you know who handles the sound patch routing for hallway C?" I thought I heard something odd in there yesterday. Silence. Then, "Don't ask stuff like that," someone muttered. "If you want to stay, just do your job." Another time I asked about a new red bulb installed near the guest restroom. It was a strange color, faintly pulsating. A segment producer looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We didn't install any new lighting," then turned and walked away like the conversation never happened. That's when Janine found me. Janine worked wardrobe, had for years. She was one of the few staffers who didn't seem completely hollow inside. She was always quiet, kind, and efficient. But that day, as I was walking out of the break room, she grabbed my wrist and pulled me gently aside. Her voice was almost a whisper. "You saw it, didn't you?" I froze. She looked around, then back at me. "Don't look for it again. That's how it chooses." She didn't wait for me to respond. Just let go and walked away. That night, I stayed late again. I had no reason to. I just didn't feel like going home. I wandered past the same hallway where I saw the figure. The lights flickered once as I passed. I kept walking. When I got back to my locker, there was a sticky note stuck to it. Not a prank, not a memo. Just a single word, written in neat, sharp lettering, "Believe." That was when I decided to go home and not come back the next day. I didn't quit. I just needed a break, one day to clear my head. But I never got it, because the next morning, Just before I could call in, one of the show's senior executives, someone I barely knew, found me near the elevator. She looked uncomfortable. "Ellen wants to see you," she said, "on set." I blinked. "Why?" She didn't say. Just said you'd know. There was a pause. Then she added almost reluctantly, she also said to bring the envelope. I stared at her. What envelope? But she just shrugged. She said you'd know. And I did. Because 2 weeks earlier, on my birthday, Ellen had handed me a small, sealed envelope along with a hoodie and a free AMC pass. "Just in case you ever feel too heavy," she said. I thought it was a joke, a kindness, maybe even a hint at a promotion. But now, as I reached into my backpack and felt the paper inside, I realized she hadn't given it as a gift. She'd given it as a test. And whatever I said in that next conversation would decide what was waiting inside. The envelope felt heavier that day. I know it doesn't make sense. It was just a sealed slip of paper. But walking across that empty soundstage with it in my hand felt like carrying a stone. The lights were already dim when I arrived. Not off, not bright, just wrong. A kind of muted amber glow that seemed to flatten the air. The set had the lifeless feel of a room still echoing with something it wasn't built to contain. Chairs pushed in too perfectly, coffee mugs on side tables that no one drank from. The whole place felt posed. And there she was. Ellen sat in one of the guest chairs, the same spot where movie stars and influencers and viral nobodies had all sat, laughing and clapping on cue. She looked up at me like I was someone famous. "There he is," she said, smiling too wide. "Let's do something fun today." She motioned for me to sit across from her. "Pretend you're Taylor Swift," she said. I hesitated, unsure if I was supposed to laugh. I tried to smile, but it probably came out crooked. "You want me to?" "Just sit. Let me practice some questions." I sat down slowly. The seat felt too soft, too warm, like someone had just left it. I noticed the cushion had a faint indentation, like a shadow had been there before me. Ellen crossed her legs and tilted her head. "So, Taylor," she said, her tone mock serious, "is it true you write your best songs when you're heartbroken, or are you just addicted to the attention?" I blinked, unsure if this was still part of the act. She grinned again, but there was something off behind it, like the smile wasn't connected to anything real, just a shape she'd memorized. "You're good at staying quiet," she said suddenly. "I like that." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, gaze heavy. "I noticed you the first week. You never made things awkward, never spoke unless spoken to, always watching." I nodded slowly, unsure if this was a compliment or a warning. She tapped the armrest between us. "But you saw something you weren't supposed to, didn't you?" My mouth went dry. I didn't respond. That night, the hallway. "You weren't supposed to see him yet." She stood walking slowly across the stage like she wasn't inside a studio, but something ancient. Her footsteps didn't echo. They just existed. "The trickster doesn't like being seen too soon," she said. "But maybe that's my fault. I brought you too close." She turned back to me, but her eyes didn't look like they did on TV. They were dull, like someone had turned the brightness down. Eyes that reflected nothing back. "You want to know what I gave up to become Ellen DeGeneres?" She didn't wait for my answer. In 2001, my career was over. No network would touch me. No one wanted the risk. I was angry, humiliated. And then one night I had a dream, or thought I did. She walked behind the desk I'd seen so many guests sit across from, never knowing what sat beneath it, and opened a drawer. She pulled out a VHS tape, dusty, yellowing label. Silver marker scrawled across it in blocky caps. "The Kindness Pact." She set the tape down gently on the coffee table between us, like it was something sacred. "He came to me, said I'd never have to beg again, said I could own the air itself. All I had to do was stop pretending I cared." I stared at the tape. It didn't seem like a prop. The edges were worn. It had weight, like it had been watched and used. The kindness was the act, she said. The smile, the be kind mantra. That's how the trickster hides, in sweetness, in applause. In the moment, everyone feels safe. The air shifted. I could feel it, like the room was leaning in closer. I looked down at the envelope in my hand, still sealed. Its corners felt sharp now. "What's in this?" I asked. Ellen tilted her head. "You're out, or you're in. Depends on what you say next." She sat again, this time closer, too close. Her knees were almost touching mine. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you believe me?" she asked. I swallowed hard. I don't know. That's not good enough." Her smile faded. The light changed slightly. Not brighter, not darker, just deeper, like it was thickening. "Do you believe me? Or do you think I'm playing a trick on you?" My throat closed up. The words tangled before they formed. "I think I'm tired," I finally managed. "I think my head's playing tricks on me. I don't know what I saw." Ellen nodded slowly, almost like she'd been waiting for me to fail the test. She stood, moved back behind the desk with unnatural calm, opened a different drawer and pulled out a clean folder. Inside it was the envelope I'd carried in, but also a second copy, identical. She slid the folder across the table. "Good," she said softly. "It's better when people don't believe." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a printed resignation letter, dated today. My name already typed. Ellen's signature at the bottom. Not a threat, not a warning, a conclusion. "You're not a good fit," she said brightly, as if we were back in a morning meeting. "But thank you for your time." She stood once more, turned her back to me, and began to hum. That same tune. The one I'd heard in the hallway that night. The same exact pattern. Not a song, not a melody. Just a sound that followed you home. I stood, my legs felt numb, my fingers tingled. I didn't say goodbye, I didn't argue. I just left. Security was already waiting outside the set. They didn't say a word, just nodded once, motioned for me to follow, and walked me through the back corridor. I passed my locker. Didn't stop, didn't clean it out, didn't get a final paycheck. No one emailed, no exit interview, no HR closure. It was like I'd never been there at all. No trace, no goodbye, just erased. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that's part of the pact. It didn't matter what I chose that day. I told myself for years that it did. That maybe if I had played it differently, spoken with more confidence, shown less fear, answered her questions the right way, I'd still be working in the industry. Maybe I'd have moved up. Maybe none of this would still haunt me. But the truth is, that moment was never mine to control. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I went home that night and dropped the envelope on my kitchen table. I didn't open it. I couldn't. My girlfriend at the time asked why I was home early. I told her they'd let me go. She didn't ask for details. Just poured a glass of wine and turned on the TV like nothing happened. But I kept the envelope. For years, I moved it from apartment to apartment, from box to drawer, like some cursed artifact I couldn't throw away. I never looked inside. I told myself I didn't care, that it was probably some formality, some legal thing. But deep down, I think I knew. I just didn't want it confirmed. Ellen's show went on like nothing had happened. She kept dancing, smiling, giving away cash and cars and pretending the air wasn't heavy with something wrong. Millions cheered, nobody flinched. Backstage, the silence was absolute. I kept expecting someone to reach out, another crew member, a producer, someone who'd seen what I saw, but no one ever did. We'd all just vanished into our own private quiet. I tried to work, picked up some gigs in Burbank, did audio for an indie project that never released, tried editing, lighting, temp gigs, but nothing ever stuck. I couldn't stop seeing the cracks, fake laughs, memorized emotions, rooms that felt colder than they should. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye, a figure in the background of a monitor feed, a reflection in a studio mirror that didn't quite match the person in frame, and I'd freeze. Every time. I never talked about Ellen, not even when her scandals surfaced years later. The toxic workplace stories, the viral clips. People thought it was news. It wasn't. That stuff was surface rot. The real story was under the floorboards, humming, waiting. When her show finally ended in 2022, networks aired glossy farewell montages. Fans cried. Celebrities posted tributes like she'd died. But no one from behind the camera spoke up. No interviews, no exposés, just nothing. And silence is loud when it's that complete. Months passed, then years. I buried myself in normal life. Grocery lists, rent payments, forgettable jobs. Tried to forget how off the world had felt ever since. But something always lingered, like a voice just beneath the static. Then last month, I saw something that broke the trance. Netflix dropped the trailer for her new comedy special, For Your Approval. I didn't care, at first. Just another comeback, I thought. But the final scene, Ellen stood alone in an empty, darkened studio. No applause, no smile, just staring into the camera. And then she said it. The thing about kindness, she whispered, is that it was always just a trick. And then the screen cut to black. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the line, it was how she said it. Like a confession, like an inside joke, but not to the audience. To us, the ones who were there, the ones who were used. That night, I dug through the drawer where I kept the things I couldn't let go of. Old job badges, outdated call sheets, paper memories of a version of me that still wanted to believe in this industry. And there it was, the envelope, still sealed, still untouched, exactly as she gave it to me on that stage. I stared at it for a long time. There was a part of me that didn't want to know, that wanted to preserve the illusion that maybe I had chosen wrong, that maybe if I had played along better, I could have stayed. But after all these years, I needed to face it. My hands were shaking when I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My name typed cleanly at the top. A resignation letter, dated that very day, typed, finalized, signed by Ellen. My blood ran cold, because that meant it was never a test. There was no fork in the road, no trick question, no real choice. I could have said anything, screamed, laughed, cried, begged, stayed silent. It wouldn't have mattered. The letter had already been written, and that was the trick. The trickster didn't want my answer. It just wanted me to think I had one. It wanted me to carry the weight of what if for a decade, wondering if I messed up, if I blew my chance, if I imagined it all. But it had decided long before I ever sat in that chair. My silence wasn't a result of fear. It was planned. And that's when I understood what she meant. The thing about kindness is that it was always just a trick. I sat there, alone, with the letter trembling in my hands, a decade of doubt collapsing into a single cruel truth. I was never meant to stay. I was meant to see it, to be scared by it, to leave quietly, and to carry that silence with me forever. But now I see it for what it is. That envelope wasn't closure. It was a muzzle, a curtain call before the real show began. And if you're holding your own envelope, whatever form that takes, open it, read it, face it. Because once you do, the trickster loses its grip. And once you speak, the silence starts to crack. This is what happened to me. And now, it's your turn. If you've been holding your silence, maybe it's time to open your envelope too. Like the video if this story shook you. Subscribe for more stories they don't want told. And check the pinned comment. You're not alone anymore. We're listening.